The solution to that riddle could very well be sitting in government lockup right now, sealed tight inside plastic baggies, tucked away on shelves in crime labs, or neatly outlined within sworn statements and court orders that are completely hidden from the public eye. Regular folks will finally get the scoop once the detectives decide it is time. And when that day arrives, the chronological facts will paint a perfectly clear picture. 5 property sweeps, 38 agonizing days, a single vanished senior, and a mystery that simply will not fade away. The lens transitions to a peaceful view of a neighborhood road in Tucson. The evening light dips below the Catalina Mountains. A house remains totally still, lacking any cars out front, with 0 lights turned on inside. National authorities descended upon this very spot 5 separate times. Every single visit resulted in them hauling items off the premises. The video focuses intently on the main entryway. 0 activity, absolute quiet, just pure stillness. Meanwhile, deep inside a government storage unit, cardboard containers rest with tags and tamper-proof tape. The absolute truth is locked away within those very cartons. The visual gradually transitions into total darkness. The quiet becomes even more intense. This narrative is far from complete. The hunt for justice is absolutely not finished. In fact, it is picking up serious speed. Each new property sweep drags the task force inches from the finish line. Each genetic match weeds out more innocent people from the suspect list. With every sunrise, that massive family web becomes just a little bit clearer. If you possess a single shred of information regarding how Nancy Guthrie vanished, please reach out to the federal hotline by dialing 1-800-CALL-FBI or simply drop your info online at tips.fbi.gov. The relatives are currently offering a massive $1 million for helpful clues. The government's own bounty sits at $100,000. Make sure you hit subscribe and toggle your alerts on. The exact second a perpetrator's name hits the press, the instant those biological samples provide a definite match, the very minute this massive probe shifts from gathering clues to slapping on handcuffs. Our platform is the #1 place that breaking update will drop. Send this clip to anybody who has been keeping up with the mystery. When more people pay close attention to the clues, it is practically impossible for the guilty party to hide. Our team refuses to quit. We will keep pushing until she is finally brought home. We watched as numerous undercover cars pulled up to the residence, followed by a dozen agents swarming the grounds for hours. Detectives dedicated a massive chunk of their search to the main entrance. They zeroed right in on the stoop and the front path, which is exactly where they spotted Nancy Guthrie's blood trail immediately following her abduction. 5 separate times, federal agents went right back to that exact same house in Tucson, Arizona. They were not going to Nancy's place or the bloody crime scene at her front door, but rather the property belonging to her daughter Annie and her husband Tommaso Tioni. These were the absolute last individuals confirmed to be with Nancy before she vanished. On February 7th, the initial raid took place, with authorities rolling up, spending hours indoors, and snapping pictures of various rooms. Then they just kept coming back, logging a total of 5 visits during this ongoing federal probe. Every single trip ended with agents hauling things away, from a metallic case and paper evidence sacks to paperwork, and they even towed away Annie's vehicle during one sweep. Fast forward 38 days, and the authorities still have that car locked up tight in their impound lot without releasing it. Sheriff Chris Nanos went on the record about it, and the feds backed him up, noting that the search efforts at this particular house were incredibly thorough. Law enforcement has been highly intentional and relentless, yet nobody is willing to share what they uncovered or what they are still trying to find. Before diving any deeper, let me make one thing crystal clear. Because Tommaso Tioni currently faces 0 criminal charges. The police have never officially labeled him a suspect, and his wife Annie has been an open book with the authorities since the very beginning. Everything I am sharing with you is drawn straight from the public record regarding the police work on this case. These details come from official police briefings and authenticated legal documents, meaning I am not here to point fingers at anyone. We are simply breaking down the actions of the detectives to understand their significance, which leads us to ask who Tommaso Tioni really is. Tommaso Dominic Tioni came into the world on June 18th, 1975, growing up in a historic medieval village located in Italy's Tuscany region. He made the move to America during the early 2000s, putting down roots in Tucson, Arizona, and eventually tying the knot with Nancy's oldest daughter, Annie, in 2006. Right around that time, he landed a teaching gig at Basis Oro Valley. This was a prestigious charter academy in Tucson where he spent over 15 years instructing 6th grade science alongside advanced placement biology. A personal profile uploaded to an Italian cultural organization site sheds some light on his hobbies. Tioni paints himself as a guy who dabbles in writing, checks out local reptiles, jams on the bass guitar, and whips up pasta from scratch. From the outside looking in, he seemed like an incredibly low-key guy, living a peaceful life about 10 miles north of Nancy's place in the Catalina foothills. Commuting between the two houses usually eats up about 15 to 20 minutes of your day, assuming the roads are clear. Tommaso officially joined the Guthrie clan back in 2006, spending nearly 20 years showing up for every holiday dinner and birthday bash. He was completely clued in on Nancy's daily schedule, the layout of her house, her quirks, and even her health requirements. On the night of January 31st, 2026, Nancy caught an Uber from her house over to her daughter's place, pulling up at around 5:45 in the evening. They all shared a meal and played some cards, hanging out together for about 4 hours until 9:48 at night. At that point, Tommaso drove his mother-in-law back, later telling the cops that he waited to see her walk through the front door before hitting the gas. The automatic garage door went up, and then it shut right back down at exactly 9:50 that night. That tiny 2-minute time frame is the absolute last piece of hard evidence proving Nancy was safe at home, making Tommaso the final person to lay eyes on her. Before we really get into the weeds about what the feds discovered inside that house, make sure you smash the subscribe button and ring that bell if you want to keep up with every single twist and turn of this investigation. We go way beyond the standard headlines on this channel by digging into timelines, analyzing clues, and asking the tough questions that the police refuse to address. Every warrant executed is crucial. Every clue changes the game. And even what authorities refuse to say speaks volumes. Hit subscribe right now so we can jump back into January 31st, 2026 at 5:32 in the afternoon. Nancy pulled up the app on her phone to grab a car from the Catalina foothills over to Annie's place. A quick and entirely standard trip for her. She rolled up near 5:45 in the evening, walked right through the door, and gave her daughter a big hug. After saying hello to Tommaso, the three of them sat down for what sources describe as a totally normal, relaxed family dinner. Relatives who spoke out later confirmed that Nancy chilled with the couple for about 4 hours, passing the time with a few rounds of cards. It was just a regular night, and Nancy seemed to be in a fantastic mood. She was even talking about tuning into her online church broadcast the next morning, which was a Sunday tradition she never ever missed. Around 9:48 that night, Tommaso took her back to her place, swearing to detectives that he kept his eyes on her until she was securely indoors. The garage lifted up, and time-stamped camera footage shows it lowering back down at 9:50 at night, which marks the absolute last time anyone can prove Nancy made it into her house. The official timeline goes completely dark between 9:50 p.m. on January 31st and 1:47 a.m. on February 1st. Not a single text was sent out, 0 phone calls were made, and every security camera tied to the house picked up absolutely nothing. She stayed by herself in that familiar neighborhood, resting in the very same Arizona home and bed she had known intimately for well over 50 years. Then the front door camera suddenly lost its connection at exactly 1:47 in the morning. This was no random glitch or electrical issue, as detectives officially stated this exact drop in signal perfectly aligns with the window she vanished. Another smart camera on the grounds caught some movement around 2:12 a.m. But since she lacked a premium storage plan, nothing was ever saved. The connection between her cellular device and her implanted heart monitor completely severed at 2:28 in the morning. Detectives found her automobile parked outside, while her smartphone, purse, listening devices, and essential heart pills remained sitting untouched indoors. The elderly woman herself was the sole piece of the puzzle that could not be found. Crime scene technicians working the main entryway discovered tiny fluid samples that lab tests later verified as a genetic match to the missing homeowner. The way the crimson stains painted the front patio clearly showed she suffered some sort of wound right by the main doorway. Glancing at the official crime scene, pictures reveals tiny, uniformly spherical red dots scattered across the concrete surface. A retired murder detective named Chris McDonough took a close look at those visual records and pointed out a highly significant detail. Fluid falling straight down at a 90-degree angle forms flawless little circles, which strongly suggests the wounded individual was standing completely still. Had the victim been sprinting away, tripping over herself, or forcefully pulled across the yard, those marks would stretch out into arrow shapes, pointing toward the path of travel, yet these specific splatters lacked any tails whatsoever. She had to be pausing on her feet, slumped over, or resting on all fours without budging an inch as the drops fell. The images also capture a delicate spray of microscopic red specks framing the main puddles, a phenomenon the expert identified as high-impact misting. That specific formation only happens when a wounded person aggressively breathes out, hacks, or spits up bodily fluids. A heavy hack generates enough pressure to spray those minuscule dots in a wide radius away from the center point. This leaves the authorities with one extremely vital conclusion, proving she was still drawing breath as she exited her residence. She remained awake and had the physical strength to clear her airway, meaning she kept battling her attacker all the way to the front porch. Chris Nanos, the local county sheriff, mentioned to the New York Times that other elements at the property felt incredibly disturbing to his team. He completely refused to share the specifics of those findings with the general public. Tommaso Cione drove her back to her place by 9:50 p.m., and an unknown person hiding their face showed up on her porch at 1:47 a.m. Everything fell apart for her in that brief window, while the guy who gave her that final ride has kept his mouth completely shut for 38 straight days. On February 7th, 2026, which was exactly 6 days following her initial disappearance, federal investigators and local deputies pulled up to the property where Annie Guthrie lived alongside Tommaso Cione. A fleet of police cruisers locked down the perimeter while detectives spent hours combing through the interior. Eyewitnesses noticed the feds snapping a massive amount of pictures across various areas of the house during that initial sweep. Folks living nearby watched the cops take their time, analyzing every single space, executing an incredibly deep and systematic inspection rather than a simple glance around. The authorities were running a massive, highly coordinated mission to gather physical proof. Bystanders eventually spotted the search team hauling a metallic lockbox inside the doors, catching the attention of retired federal agent Tracy Walder, who analyzed the press clips and confidently identified the metal container as a specialized toolkit for securing crime scene materials. When the cops came back later, they walked out holding a pale container along with a standard paper sack meant for holding forensic items. A detective was clearly wearing protective nitrile hand coverings, which is the textbook way to handle sensitive bodily fluids or microscopic clues. Walder openly stated that the lighter box was likely just another piece of their technical gear for cataloging clues, while assuming the paper sack contained actual seized items, especially since the feds hit that same address a second, third, fourth, and ultimately fifth time. Just let that sink in for a second. Because no task force returns to a single location on 5 different occasions just for the fun of it. They keep knocking on that door because every single sweep turns up another clue that points toward even more hidden secrets. Veteran cops who examined how the case unfolded pointed out that hitting a house repeatedly is definitely far from normal police work. Bob Gilliam, an ex-federal supervisor, openly explained that securing another entry always demands fresh legal justification. In court terms, it basically means the detectives had to pitch newly discovered clues to a magistrate just to get a fresh sign-off for another sweep. The authorities simply cannot barge through the front door whenever they feel like it, since every single entry demands official paperwork. That paperwork absolutely relies on solid proof to convince a judge that even more critical items are stashed inside the building. Hitting a property 5 times requires 5 separate warrants, which means investigators had to show a judge fresh proof on 5 distinct occasions. You do not see that on a normal day. This points to a massive, laser-focused operation It clearly shows the cops are chasing leads that constantly yield solid clues. Former Murder Squad investigator John Lamb, a veteran with more than 20 years of heavy-duty case experience under his belt, analyzed these specific raids and openly mentioned that hitting a single spot over and over again proves law enforcement is actively stacking up rock-solid charges as we speak. The goal goes far beyond simply bagging clues. The authorities are locking down an airtight paper trail. Officers are logging every single detail using strict procedures designed to hold up against fierce courtroom questioning. Each picture snapped, piece of physical proof snagged, biological swab secured, and interview recorded plays a crucial role in forging an indictment strong enough to crush any pushback from opposing counsel and leave a jury absolutely convinced of guilt. While executing one of those raids, federal authorities actually towed away the ride belonging to Annie Guthrie. The head of the local department, Sheriff Chris Nanos, openly verified this detail while speaking on the record with journalists from NBC News. Authorities hauled the automobile away from the property, moving it straight into a government lockup for deep forensic screening. Fast forward 38 days, and that sedan is still sitting in their lot. Generally speaking, whenever law enforcement seizes a car tied to someone vanishing without a trace, the whole inspection wraps up in just a few days or possibly a week at most. Crime scene techs comb through it, hunting for microscopic clues, bodily fluids, stray threads, and latent prints. Specialists will suck up any loose hairs from the upholstery using special vacuums and wipe down the dash and doors to pull genetic profiles. The cargo area gets scrutinized for hidden gore, dirt patches, or out-of-place objects, while the bottom of the chassis gets a thorough visual sweep. Experts analyze the rubber on the wheels to find distinct grooves that might link back to tracks left at a dump site. However, today's automobiles hold far more secrets than simple steel and upholstery. These machines literally act as mechanical snitches. Any ride rolling off the assembly line since 2014 comes packed with a data logger functioning exactly like the flight recorders found on commercial jets. That hidden computer continuously tracks how fast you travel, how hard you hit the brakes, how quickly you step on the gas, and how sharply you turn the wheel. Whenever a driver pushes the engine to its limits, slams on the stopping pedal, or floors it out of nowhere, the system logs those exact moments permanently. On top of that, onboard navigation tracks exact global positioning. Anytime someone punches a street name or zip code into the dashboard screen, that destination gets locked right into the internal hard drive. Wiping the recent trips folder does absolutely nothing, because computer experts easily resurrect those ghost files anyway. A lot of modern models hold on to historical tracking pings spanning several months. Law enforcement essentially uses this digital breadcrumb trail to draw a perfect map tracing every single journey the automobile took. Built-in network services like OnStar and smart radio subscriptions constantly ping cell towers, allowing detectives to pinpoint locations regardless of whether the main navigation feature was switched on or off. Should that particular SUV have taken a trip out to some isolated spot late in the evening of January 31st or before sunrise on February 1st, the digital proof is sitting right there. Furthermore, the moment detectives spot a red flag buried in those logs, whether it highlights a shady stop or paints a fresh sequence of events, or reveals a weird detour contradicting the official story, they absolutely refuse to hand the keys back before completing every conceivable scientific test. The crazy part is, the tech goes even deeper, since current automobiles monitor practically your every move. The internal sensors keep a diary of exactly which passenger doors swung open and the precise second it happened. Computers memorize whether the occupants buckled up. They write down the exact minute the ignition fired up, the total duration the engine idled, and even how cold or hot the weather outside happened to be. Certain high-end packages will straight up capture cabin video clips, assuming the rig comes equipped with those fancy autopilot safety features. Every shred of that telemetry patiently camps out inside the central processing unit, just begging to be downloaded by cyber specialists who understand exactly how to bypass the firewalls. Local news crews grilled the sheriff face-to-face, demanding to know the real reason the family hasn't gotten their transport back yet. He kept his cards close to his chest, basically stating it is still a vital piece of an active probe, and flat out refused to elaborate further. Make no mistake, that is not him dodging the question. That is textbook tactical silence. Government attorneys constructing a major indictment absolutely refuse to leak clues, because doing so hands the bad guys a head start to spin lies, torch remaining proof, or get their alibis straight. That metallic lockbox, those tan paper collection sacks, the pale storage trunk, the automobile itself, every single object hauled out of that house currently rests inside a highly secured government locker, fully indexed, meticulously tested, and guarded by a rock-solid trail of paperwork guaranteed to survive a brutal courtroom trial. Whenever a search team tears apart a property looking for someone who vanished off the map, they are hunting for a few very specific things. Jackets, sneakers, or basically any garment the victim potentially threw on right around the window they went off the grid. Crime lab techs run rigorous sweeps over those exact pieces, swabbing them for genetic markers and scraping off dirt clumps or tiny leaf fragments that could tie a suspect directly to some random patch of woods, not to mention grabbing every smartphone, laptop, iPad, external disk, memory stick, and flash drive in sight. Cyber squads easily resurrect wiped SMS conversations, trashed camera roll pictures, and completely cleared browser tabs. These guys strip the hidden background code out of snapshots to reveal the exact GPS coordinates and timestamps of when the shutter clicked. They also crack into secure chat platforms, pulling up conversations the account holder foolishly assumed were gone forever. Signal, Telegram, WhatsApp, and even Snapchat. Every single text you fire off leaves behind a permanent cyber trail out there in the void, sometimes existing purely as a split-second handshake signal bounced off a remote network tower. Paperwork and money trails get the same intense treatment, with detectives scooping up checking account histories and printed checkout slips. Law enforcement literally pieces together an entire day just by following where the money went. Swiping your plastic at a random pump pins your exact whereabouts down to the minute. Pulling bills from a teller machine completely blows up your story about having $0 to your name. Finding a big box store invoice showing someone bought heavy-duty tape, plastic sheets, industrial ammonia, and scrub brushes just a few days prior to a felony throws up massive red flags. Detectives hunt down personal journals, daily agendas, organizers, and any jotted down memos. A solitary piece of paper revealing a lie has cracked open entire investigations for law enforcement before. Authorities constantly rummage through jackets for forgotten slips of paper, financial records showing fuel purchases at exact hours, or discarded burger wrappers in garbage bins that prove a driver passed through a certain town on a given evening. Search teams always keep an eye out for sanitation products, massive hauls of chlorine, germ killers, garbage sacks, and proof of payment for rug scrubbers that were borrowed and brought back right after someone vanished. Chemical sprays can expose wiped up gore that remains hidden in the fibers. Special ultraviolet lamps bring out bodily secretions that regular human vision could never spot. Crime scene techs are constantly on the prowl for organic evidence, strands of fur, clothing threads, dead tissue, red droplets, and spit. Practically any trace that lab technicians can examine, break down, and match against the DNA swabs gathered from the home of Nancy Guthrie. Bob Gilliam, a retired Federal Bureau supervisor, openly explained that police hitting up a single property over and over is a massive red flag that they are tracking physical clues. A single clue always points to the next logical step. Finding one thing immediately shifts the scope of the hunt, like when cops spot a store ticket during their initial sweep. This paper slip points to an exact retail shop on a very particular afternoon. Law enforcement then swings back for round two, specifically hunting for whatever was bought. The detectives uncover the object in question. It turns out that this specific possession is covered in microscopic clues. This triggers a third sweep to gather even more swabs from the exact corner where the goods were stashed. These new pieces go straight to testing, and the scientists confirm the presence of human tissue. Cops show up a fourth time armed with reactive chemicals, specialized flashlights, and high-tech gear built to sniff out scrubbed-away gore that scrubbing could not fully destroy. Every single sweep lays the groundwork for the subsequent one. A fresh find gives a judge a reason to sign the next court order, but then a quietness sets in. The moment the missing persons report dropped on February 1st, 2026, the relatives immediately started talking to the press. Savannah Guthrie, the youngest kid in the family and a famous morning television host, dropped her work duties and hopped on a flight straight to Tucson. She uploaded heartbreaking clips online, begging anyone to bring her mom home unharmed. The broadcaster even put up a $1 million personal bounty for her safe recovery. Showing her face on television over and over again, she spoke directly to the kidnappers, desperately asking them to show that her mother was still breathing. The missing woman's son, a military veteran named Cameron Guthrie, also stood in front of the lens. He looked straight into the lens to ask the culprits to let his mom go. The former officer joined the civilian rescue parties out in the field. He gave his full cooperation to the local police department. Annie Guthrie was so completely open with the authorities that detectives ended up combing through her house on 5 separate occasions and even towed her car away for inspection. The entire clan made sure to stay in the spotlight and remain highly vocal right after the kidnapping, with the glaring exception of a single individual. Tommaso Tioni has kept his mouth completely shut in front of the cameras. He never released a memo, nor did he stand next to Annie while she faced the media. The guy has not muttered a single syllable about the manhunt, the pleas from his in-laws, or the massive bounty. 38 agonizing days of absolute pin-drop quietness from his end. John Lamb, a veteran murder investigator, looked over the sequence of events and made it clear that keeping quiet during a crisis is a deliberate choice rather than a lack of action. Staying mute is an intentional move, repeated morning after morning. A criminal mind expert named Dr. Gary Baccato, heavily experienced in helping police profile suspects when people vanish, pointed out that whenever the relative who last hung out with the targeted individual decides to dodge the media entirely, particularly while the rest of the household is practically begging for clues on television, the lack of talking speaks volumes. It usually implies that the person is following strict orders from their defense attorney. This does not automatically point to them being the killer. It simply shows their lawyers told them to shut up so they do not accidentally say something prosecutors could twist against them later in court. However, it also highlights one glaring reality. The defense squad representing Tommaso Tioni clearly thinks he has a massive vulnerability if he talks. Whatever their underlying logic happens to be, it completely overpowers the societal backlash, the desperate pleas from relatives, and the heavy guilt of staying quiet while his wife's mother remains lost. Detectives pay close attention to radio silence. Cops always take note of the loud voices and the suspiciously quiet one. They watch the crowds at media briefings to see exactly who shows their face. They track the helpful citizens versus the ones hiding behind expensive lawyers, weaving all these clues into a solid psychological profile. Yet, Tommaso Tioni is definitely not the lone suspect generating heat from the authorities in this bizarre mystery. On the 4th of February, 2026, a mere 3 days following the official report of Nancy Guthrie vanishing, federal agents busted a guy 300 miles away in Hawthorne, California. The suspect goes by the name of Derek Hawthorne. Authorities slapped him with charges for faking extortion threats related to the kidnapped woman. Barely 48 hours after getting cuffed, marshals shipped him to Tucson, locking him up under the tight watch of the United States Attorney for the Arizona District. Dr. Gary Baccato, the profiling expert checking out the official paperwork, caught a very bizarre detail regarding the bust and how insanely fast they moved the prisoner. Hawthorne literally had zero ties to the victim. The dude resided way out in Los Angeles County. His background showed absolutely no links to Tucson. Despite that, the government lawyers in Arizona demanded him on their turf right away. Whenever law enforcement accelerates their timeline to that extreme degree, skipping the usual out-of-state transfer protocols to relocate a suspect in just a matter of days, it screams desperation and implies the person holds secrets far exceeding their official charges. Legal filings showed Hawthorne actually stayed in touch with the Guthrie household well before Nancy ever went missing. The sworn statement pointed to specific money matters completely left out of the extortion letters mailed to the press. Dr. Baccato openly admitted this specific discrepancy caused him serious concern. This pointed toward existing ties, hinting Hawthorne possessed insider knowledge regarding the family dynamic long before Nancy vanished. It is still up in the air whether this paints him as a co-conspirator, a bystander, or just someone looking to cash in. However, detectives never fly suspects around the country on the government's dime unless they suspect a much deeper plot. Former FBI operative Bob Gilliam noted that catching someone for fake extortion schemes and instantly hauling them back to the original crime scene usually means one thing. Law enforcement considers that individual to be the absolute most vulnerable point in the chain. Should a broader cover-up exist with a handful of different players pulled into the mix, the initial guy taken down usually faces the steepest risks and the biggest rewards for flipping. So cops will throw him in an interrogation room and offer a pair of choices. Door number one involves spilling your guts to the detectives so they can put in a good word with the federal attorneys handling your case. Then there is door number two, keeping your mouth shut and getting crushed by national obstruction penalties, perjury accusations, and whatever else they can pin on you, which is why almost everyone takes the first deal. Nobody knows yet if Derek Hawthorne actually talked or if he gave up any names regarding potential accomplices. The only certainty right now is his continued lockup in a Tucson federal facility while detectives keep piling up their evidence. We need to make this absolutely clear again. Tommaso Cione faces 0 legal accusations and has never been labeled a person of interest. Annie Guthrie completely complied with law enforcement from day one, a fact Sheriff Chris Nanos has backed up on the record, yet the paper trail of police work, the constant property sweeps, the confiscated car, and the quiet treatment all weave together into a web that detectives are carefully tracking, not necessarily to prove anyone did it, but rather to build out an overarching timeline that will finally reveal the ultimate truth behind Nancy Guthrie's disappearance. Here is a rundown of the exact evidence authorities pulled from the Guthrie home. Forensics locked down trace biological matter matching Nancy's genetic profile, alongside crimson droplets on the porch that suggest she took a hit right by the front door. They also found unidentified male genetics, which Sheriff Chris Nanos openly admitted on February 19th was a blended sample containing traces from multiple people. That specific swab ended up at an independent Florida testing center to get untangled and examined. Technicians ran into hurdles isolating the different profiles, though they promised results in a matter of weeks or maybe months, shifting the focus straight toward advanced ancestry tracing. This matches the exact technique used to finally nail the Golden State Killer following a 40-year hunt. It is the very same approach that pinned down Brian Kohberger during the University of Idaho homicide investigation. That identical strategy cracked the Gilgo Beach mystery wide open, and it works without a direct database hit or the suspect ever voluntarily giving up a genetic swab in their life. All it takes is a single distant family member popping up on a consumer ancestry platform. Sites like Ancestry.com, 23, and Me, MyHeritage, and Family Tree DNA are exactly where they look. A random relative probably mailed in a spit tube years back just to check out their cultural roots, totally oblivious that their curiosity would eventually help catch a crook way down the line. The whole ancestral tracing system essentially breaks down like this. Specialized researchers grab the mystery genetic code from the crime scene and plug it right into GEDmatch, an open source hub where regular folks have given the green light for police to snoop around. The software runs that sequence against every single user on the site, hunting for fragmented overlaps instead of perfect hits, searching specifically for second or third cousins. Those long-lost family members still carry enough overlapping genetic markers to trigger an alert. The moment a connection pops up, these specialists start mapping the family lineage in reverse. They figure out exactly which great-grandparent ties the unidentified perpetrator to that random database user. From there, they map everything forward, tracking down every single person born from that shared bloodline to shrink the suspect list. They cross off anybody who misses the mark on body type, age bracket, or physical whereabouts. Researchers dig through government documents, birth logs, wedding certificates, death notices, online profiles, and transit IDs, whittling down the options until only one guy is left standing. That final person checks every single box, instantly becoming the primary target of the entire police department. Undercover tails get assigned while agents start digging through the garbage, legally snagging tossed coffee cups or napkins out of public dumpsters to test for saliva. Once that swab hits the lab and lines up perfectly with the original evidence, the hunt is officially over. We've seen this exact technique crack mysteries that sat frozen for 30, 40, and even 50 years. A forensic genealogy expert named Dr. Gary Botto, who frequently steps in to advise on these complex investigations, recently went on record to explain how pinpoint accurate the science has gotten, allowing law enforcement to lock onto a suspect just by matching with a distant third or fourth cousin. From there, the genealogical web simply ripples out in all directions. Experts map out every single bloodline, tracking down all living relatives until they pinpoint absolutely anyone who might actually match the genetic material they found. Next comes the process of whittling down the options by crossing off folks who are the wrong age, live in the wrong state, don't fit the visual profile, or come from a different heritage. Candidate by candidate, the possibilities dwindle until investigators are staring at just a few people, or occasionally a lone individual. Authorities absolutely keep things under wraps when they reach that point, choosing to quietly run surveillance and build up their physical proof before finally swooping in to make an arrest. Based on the electronic trail left behind, we can confirm the detectives currently hold several key pieces of the puzzle. They pulled mobile network pings to track every single smart device traveling between the Catalina Foothills property and Camino Royale, picking up the exact moment a residential security lens caught a car driving past at precisely 2:36 in the morning, while also pulling automated plate scanner logs from the entire surrounding grid. Detectives are sifting through roughly 10,000 hours of neighborhood video feeds, pulling clips from front porch doorbells, smart home security setups, and local intersection monitors. Search engine analytics reveal that folks in Arizona were looking up Nancy Guthrie's personal address way back in June of 2025, with another massive surge of interest hitting the web in January of 2026. Ex-detective Chris McDonough brought up a fantastic perspective regarding the local sheriff's recent press conference, where he mentioned they had to comb through 100,000 cars. Modern tech actually blows through that kind of workload at lightning speed, far quicker than the average citizen might ever guess. An Israeli military and police application known as BriefCam has the power to chew through mountains of raw footage in a matter of moments, simply by typing in exactly what you want to see. If you punch in a request for a blue sedan at 1:47 in the morning on the 1st of February, the program rips through the video, grabs every matching ride from that window, and spits out a clean report in less than 5 minutes. Tasks that historically forced cops to sit in dark rooms watching tapes for weeks on end are now wrapped up during a coffee break. Hearing the brass talk about sorting 100,000 automobiles isn't an excuse for delays. It simply describes the size of the information pile they are dealing with. Best believe those files have already been completely chewed through and analyzed by the system. Authorities actually deployed this exact same BriefCam software during the tragic Las Vegas Festival massacre, using it to calculate the exact bullet count just by reading the visual weapon bursts caught on cell phones. City cops rely on it to follow perpetrators jumping from one street camera to the next, literally identifying targets by their walking rhythm, wardrobe choices, and physical dimensions across countless different views. So if Sheriff Nanos goes on television and mentions a massive video review, do not picture a bunch of tired rookies squinting at tiny screens until midnight. What he really means is that heavy-duty artificial intelligence is crunching endless terabytes of visual data, picking out the right trucks, mapping where they went, and assembling a perfect chronology without human help. The heavy lifting is already being handled entirely by the machines. Let's look at what the task force is actively working on behind the scenes, starting with the deep dive genetic screening they are running on the biological trace found inside the cabin. They are meticulously constructing that ancestral web, shrinking down the list of potential bad guys relative by relative, all while forensically tearing apart Annie Guthrie's ride. The team is pulling every ounce of location history, ripping files off hard drives, testing bodily fluids in the lab, and pounding the pavement to knock on every door in the neighborhood. Detectives are actively grilling locals about Wi-Fi outages that happened late on the 1st of February, rounding up even more security tapes, and setting up a specialized strike team right inside the Tucson Federal Building. That crew consists of a sergeant and 4 seasoned homicide investigators from the Pima County Sheriff's Department, burning the midnight oil right next to federal agents. Now let's talk about what the authorities are refusing to do, starting with the fact that they are keeping potential suspect identities completely under wraps. Not a single peep has been made about the physical items seized across those 5 different raids, nor are they bragging about the clues they pulled from Annie's automobile. The department absolutely refuses to entertain internet rumors regarding the perpetrators, and you have to understand that this radio silence is a brilliant tactical maneuver rather than a sign of incompetence. On the 2nd of March, Sheriff Chris Nanos explicitly told reporters that he's keeping certain cards close to his chest simply because leaking those details would ruin their chances in a courtroom, not because it hurts the manhunt. The fact that he specifically mentioned the trial phase gives away their exact endgame, proving that the squad has moved way past merely hunting for clues. They are actively bulletproofing their criminal charges so a defense attorney can't shred them in front of a jury. Every single house they raid, every car they tow away, every genetic swab they process, and every phone ping they map out acts as another nail in the coffin. Forensic psychologist Dr. Gary Brucato took a hard look at the timeline and reminded everyone that hard genetic mapping doesn't require a guilty plea to work its magic. Science doesn't care if a suspect wants to talk because the ancestral web practically weaves itself together using totally legal, publicly accessible consumer heritage sites. The moment that genetic trail hits a dead end, law enforcement is left staring at a first and last name that has been hiding in the servers all along. Those computer models are churning away as we speak. And according to every reliable source on the inside, the countdown to an official arrest warrant is ticking down faster than anyone realizes. Former federal agent and true crime analyst John Lamb made it crystal clear that this situation is literally the furthest thing from a dead-end mystery. The trail is scorching hot right now, especially with roughly 100 different officers and desk jockeys aggressively chasing down fresh tips. They've got the genetic mapping firing on all cylinders, while simultaneously ripping through massive piles of electronic communications. Throw in a ton of search warrants, bringing in fresh physical clues, and you quickly realize this investigation is moving at breakneck speed, even though there are still a few giant blind spots left to uncover. The exact findings from the family tree DNA testing remain a complete mystery to the public. It is also completely unclear whether detectives have managed to zero in on any particular people of interest at this stage of the probe. The specific clues hidden inside Annie's car that justify authorities holding it for 38 consecutive days are still totally unknown. Details regarding the items recovered across those 5 separate property sweeps have not been released. Any information the mobile network pings might reveal regarding phones traveling along the route connecting New York's residents to Camino Royale at 2:36 in the morning has been kept under wraps. Authorities have not confirmed if they successfully put a name to the disguised person caught on New York's front porch security footage. It remains to be seen if the suspect profile drafted by the Federal Bureau of Investigation, a person between 5'9" and 5'10" inches tall, with an ordinary frame and a potential scar on their arm, actually fits a known suspect. Here is the absolute certainty. Law enforcement professionals are proceeding with extreme caution. They are piecing together a solid prosecution while ensuring their most crucial discoveries stay entirely confidential. The moment their ducks are in a row, they will make a move. Once that strike happens, expect a fast, highly organized takedown supported by proof gathered over a very long period. 38 full days have passed. Nancy Guthrie is currently 84 years of age. It has been 38 days since she vanished from the house where she spent decades creating a family. Savannah, her child, has put up a staggering $1 million bounty for answers. The Federal Bureau of Investigation contributed an additional $100,000 to that pot. Meanwhile, national authorities have executed 5 distinct warrants at the property belonging to her kid and son-in-law. One of their household cars was towed away for inspection. Law enforcement gathered physical clues, ran genetic profiles, scrutinized electronic data, and sketched out a comprehensive sequence of events. Their efforts are totally relentless. During a public address on March 2nd, Sheriff Chris Nano confidently stated that the task force is inching much nearer to the truth. Earlier, on February 19th, the sheriff acknowledged that forensic teams were running biological samples through advanced ancestral databases to find a match. Back on February 7th, government operatives carried out the initial raid out of 5 total sweeps at the house belonging to the final individuals known to have been with Nancy before she disappeared. The stack of proof keeps growing. The window of opportunity is getting smaller, the branches of that ancestral search are bringing them straight to a target. Out there in the city of Tucson, Arizona, a specific person holds the awful truth about Nancy Guthrie's fate. An individual is aware of her current location. A person understands the motive behind her abduction. Somebody realizes exactly what authorities dug up during those 5 property inspections. Detectives are systematically and stubbornly bridging the gap between collecting clues and slapping cuffs on a suspect. The clock kept ticking. Mere days dragged into long weeks. Those weeks eventually turned into a full month. Behind closed doors, however, the task force's dedication never wavered. They kept tearing through locations. The lab kept running genetic sequences. That ancestral web kept expanding. Yet the single biggest mystery hanging over this entire ordeal since February 1st has always been, what exactly are they trying to find? This same technique identified the Golden State Killer after 40 years and broke open the University of Idaho case. When one family member stays completely silent while every other relative pleads publicly, investigators take careful note. AI video platforms can process 100,000 vehicles in the time it takes to drink a cup of coffee. Tactical silence from law enforcement during an active case is a strategy, not a sign of failure. If you have any information about Nancy Guthrie, call 1-800-CALL-FBI or visit tips.fbi.gov. A $1 million family reward and a $100,000 federal reward are still active. Nancy Guthrie deserves answers. Subscribe and turn on alerts so you never miss an update on this investigation. Federal agents returned to the same house 5 separate times in a single missing persons case. Nancy Guthrie vanished from her Tucson home on the night of January 31st, 2026, at 84 years old. The last confirmed proof she was safe was a garage door closing at exactly 9:50 p.m. Her front door camera lost its signal at 1:47 a.m. A drop, detectives say, aligns precisely with her disappearance. When evidence goes dark, it does not disappear. It waits to be found. Round droplets at a crime scene with no tails tell investigators the victim was still and upright when they were formed. High-impact misting around those droplets confirmed Nancy was still breathing and fighting as she left her front door. 5 separate search warrants at one address means investigators found new evidence compelling enough to return each time. Modern vehicles are silent witnesses, storing GPS routes, door timestamps, speed logs, and even cabin footage. Every piece of technology left behind tells a story. Investigators know how to read. Forensic genealogy can identify a suspect using only a distant cousin's ancestry profile uploaded years earlier.